Good morning. Welcome to the fourth Sunday of Advent. The sun will be coming back soon. 2 more days till the solstice, and the days will start getting incrementally, very slowly, longer. Yay! Waking up in the dark is getting old. Anyway, why don't we get started with the sermon? The gospel reading is one we've all heard before, and when you hear it tomorrow, you'll say, oh, yeah. And as I give the sermon, you'll also catch on because we've all heard this story before. Because the fourth Sunday of Advent, naturally, we always have appointed an annunciation. Some years it's the annunciation to Joseph, but usually it's the annunciation to Mary. One side note that I've mentioned over and over again is that throughout the scriptures, both Old and New Testaments, God seems to find the most unlikely people to be messengers of the divine will, usually fallen women, which kind of gives us a big hint as to how God views these folks, not with judgment or condemnation, but with trust. Now, I'm not trying to make the correlation that we are fallen women. However, remember, God always chooses the most unlikely. That's us. And in the event, as the story goes, the angel Gabriel appears to Mary, who's just minding her own bloody business in her family home in Nazareth, and brings her the news that she's to give birth to the Messiah. Again, God seems to be choosing the most unlikely of people to do the divine will. Mary gets the news and essentially says, who? Me? I don't think so. One theologian, drawing on archetypes from the Old Testament, believes that this wasn't the first annunciation, that Gabriel and Mary had already had this conversation a couple of times, and that Mary had given a firm thanks but no each time. First, we have to look at who Mary was before she became the venerated Mother of God, the Theotokos, the God bearer. Mary was a nobody. She was an illiterate 14-year-old girl living in a small village in the middle of absolutely nowhere, barely the age to be married off, and certainly in the dark about where babies came from. And then the angel shows up out of nowhere and gives her the news that she's been chosen by God, no less, to be the mother of the Messiah. I suspect she at first questions her sanity and dismisses Gabriel altogether as the result of something maybe she had eaten. She may have been young, but she wasn't stupid. So on this particular visit, if we go that route, Mary realizes that something real might be going on and tells Gabe that this whole idea is preposterous. You know, I've never been with a man, a fact of which she is aware is necessary for babies to happen. He quips that, oh, this won't be a problem. God will take care of that. Whether by a virgin birth or the assistance of St. Joseph isn't really mentioned, but that's somewhat beside the point at this juncture. After Gabe assures her that God is in the mix, she somewhat begrudgingly agrees to the venture, and the rest, as they say, is history. A major theme that runs through the Hebrew scriptures and into the Christian scriptures is that life is a minefield. A series of incidents, some of which are rather questionable, and some of which are downright dark and possibly evil. They cause us untold suffering both personally and corporately. The Hebrew scriptures are one story after another of the infidelity of the Hebrew people, which leads them to disaster because of their infidelity. And the usual scenario of death and destruction gets played out once again. Mary's story is also a minefield. She's a 14-year-old girl in a rural village, which means it's probably not the most progressive place in the world, and winds up pregnant in a culture where such a thing is exponentially more taboo than it is in ours. I can only imagine St. Anne looking over her glasses in disgust when Mary relates that she's pregnant because none other than the angel Gabriel showed up and made it so. And Blessed Anne replies, "And you expect me to believe that story?" To be quite honest, our own personal lives are just like Mary's, yet another minefield. That's not to say that there aren't lovely moments in our lives, nor that there were none in Mary's. They occur when we don't step on a mine. But eventually we step on one and everything blows up. Just look back on your own minefield and you'll see tons of craters left behind. We all have them. If we look backwards towards the last year, maybe minefield isn't a strong enough metaphor, but it'll have to do. There's COVID and self-quarantining and social distancing and masks and not being able to touch each other. And this is the mild stuff, right? Then there are the anti-maskers and the anti-vaxxers and the conspiracy theorists and the QAnon idiots. There are now over 300,000 dead and the numbers rising on steroids every day. This means that there is a spider effect of those of the 300,000 left behind, left in grief and desolation. And add to that the threat of poverty and hunger because of the unemployment situation and the inability of Congress to get its act together to do anything about it. Then there's Trump and the elections. I could go on about that, but who wants to watch a 6-day video? The point of all this is that humanity, by virtue of how we are made and our physical separation from our true source of life, plants its own minefields. We have since we climbed out of the primordial ooze. It's not a judgment, it's just the way things work. And God doesn't come down and remove the mines and make life rosy. That's not who or what God is or how God works. Rather, God rises up inside of us and gives us hints as to where the mines are located and how to walk around them. If we make the choice to listen to the still small voice deep within, we connect with the Holy One of all that is, so that even if we do step on a mine, we survive and are transformed into something new. Mary may have been an illiterate 14-year-old peasant girl, but she was also a daughter of Abraham. She knew that still small voice very well because when Gabriel posed her mission impossible to her, that still small voice said to her, "You can do this. You are not alone, because I am and will be with you." And Mary said yes. And by her yes, the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. The Old Testament archetype that life is a minefield leading to the usual scenario of death and destruction is incomplete unless we fill it out with the rest of the story. That God is always faithful. That in the midst of life's minefields, whether we've planted them ourselves or, as in the case of Mary, someone else has planted them for us, God is in the mix deep within the human heart, leading us out of the minefield onto solid and safe ground. And this is where Mary was after Gabriel left. She knew that what lay ahead would be the biggest challenge of her life so far. But she also was filled with expectant hope in the knowledge that God was with her and that she didn't move into the future alone or isolated. We are in this present moment in our history living in the beginnings of the second portion of the archetype. We are moving into a somewhat uncertain future together with expectant hope. The vaccine is finally here and being given. Trump is on his way out. Yes, he'll continue to tweet and be annoying, but at least he won't be making public policy that severely damages human life and the planet itself, although his minions will remain, and we continue to live in expectant hope that this too will come to an end. We live in the expectant hope that one day we will again be able to embrace our loved ones and share the peace in church, that we again will sup from the chalice on the cup of salvation, that COVID will be history, that we will have all learned something about ourselves and our world, so that the new normal into which we are moving will be a place of new life, not just for ourselves, but for every creature on this insignificant but magnificent little planet out in the middle of nowhere. And it will be, if we follow Mary's example and say yes to the voice of God deep within. It's not that God places conditions on us. It's the promise that when we say yes to God, the Word is made flesh again, full of grace and truth. As you prepare your reflections for tomorrow's Mass and what you might share, look back across your own minefields. We all have them. There are lots of big holes there. Think back as to how you got where you are now. Not unscathed, but still in one piece. Think back and remind yourself of the times in which you were aware of God's faithfulness, which is always there, but sometimes we don't notice it. But sometimes we do. Remember the times you were like Mary, faced with a minefield with no choice but to move forward, and saying yes to that still small voice deep within, reminding you, you are not alone. I am with you in Jesus Christ, your Lord. Amen. So that is today's sermon. This email also contains the liturgy for tomorrow, as well as the links for Zoom Mass and links to the readings. Later in the week, you'll be getting the bulletin for Christmas Eve. There are two versions. There is one that actually has the music like you would see it in the hymnal, and then there's one version that just has the words for the hymns and carols, which should be quite lovely. Can't think of any special announcements, except if you haven't gotten your pledge in yet, please do so. There is a vestry meeting tomorrow afternoon after Zoom Mass, and we will be discussing our financial future. I don't do financial plugs very often, but you know, it's that time of the year. Anyway, I hope you all have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the drizzle. It'll probably get dark around 1 p.m. It's that time of year. So, blessings to you all. Bye.